He didn't slam the door. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just walked. Left the porch light on, left the truck in the driveway, left his daughter's bicycle leaning against the railing where he'd propped it up that same afternoon. Cole Merritt took nothing but his wallet, his keys to a car that wasn't there, and the image burned into the back of his eyes, an image he would spend the next 7 years trying to forget. His wife, his brother, a single lamp glowing in the living room, and the way she had her face buried in his chest, like she was holding on for dear life. Most people, when they discover a betrayal, they fight, they confront, they fall apart right there on the kitchen floor. Cole didn't do any of that, because Cole Merritt was the kind of man who had spent his whole life holding things together. And the moment he couldn't anymore, he disappeared. This is the story of what he left behind, what he never knew, and the truth that came for him 7 years too late to change a single thing. Before we go further, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. These are the stories that don't make the news but stay with you forever. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let's get into it. Cole Merritt was not a complicated man. He woke at 5, drove 40 minutes to the lumber yard where he'd worked for 11 years, came home smelling like pine and diesel, helped his daughter with her spelling words, watched the news with June until she fell asleep on his shoulder. That was his life, and he loved it the way you love something only when it's already slipping through your fingers, without knowing it's happening at all. June taught reading to second graders at Elm Street Elementary. She packed Ellie's lunch with a little note folded inside every single day. On weekends, she made biscuits from scratch and left the radio on low. She was the kind of woman who made ordinary life feel like enough. And Wade? Wade was Cole's younger brother by 4 years, the loud one, the charming one, the one who'd borrowed money a dozen times and paid it back half as often. But he was blood. And to Cole, blood meant something that most people couldn't put into words. They'd grown up poor in the same 2-bedroom house. They'd buried their father together. They'd stood side by side at each other's worst moments. Cole trusted Wade the way you trust your own heartbeat, without thinking about it. He never thought to question that trust. Not once. Not until the night of October 14th. What Cole saw that night would end 3 lives, not just his own. Cole had left work early that evening. Nothing dramatic about it. His shift supervisor sent half the crew home. Slow week, mill was backed up. Cole stopped for gas, thought about calling June, figured he'd surprise her. He pulled onto his street just past 8. Wade's truck was at the curb. He almost smiled. Wade had a habit of dropping in unannounced. June never minded. Cole certainly didn't. He cut the engine, walked up the porch steps. The front door was unlocked. And then he saw them. June, her face buried in his brother's chest, Wade's arms around her, his chin resting on her hair, the lamp casting long shadows across the wall. Cole stood in that doorway for what felt like a full minute. Maybe it was 5 seconds. He'd never be able to say. He didn't hear what was being said. He couldn't see her face. He saw only the shape of it. 2 people holding each other in a dark house. His house. June's head turned slightly, but Cole was already off the porch, already at the end of the driveway, already gone. He didn't take his truck, he didn't take his phone, he just walked, and he kept walking for 7 years. Cole didn't plan it. That's the thing people never understand about disappearing. It's not a decision you make at a desk with a plan. It's a decision your legs make for you while your brain is still catching up. He walked 4 miles to the Greyhound station on Route 21, paid cash for a ticket to a city he'd never been, sat in the back of the bus with his head against the glass, and watched his whole life slide past in the dark. He told himself he was just going for the night. He told himself that for 3 weeks. He found work at a grain mill in a town called Reedsville, 2 states away, rented a room from an older woman who asked no questions, worked 6 days a week, slept hard, dreamed harder. June called his cell phone 16 times in the first week. He watched every call come in. He never answered. On the 17th call, he walked to the edge of the property, a soybean field that went on forever, and threw the phone as far as he could throw it. He told himself he was protecting Ellie from a broken home. He told himself that for 7 years. Twice he got as far as dialing the house number. Twice he hung up before the first ring. He wasn't ready. He kept waiting to be ready. What Cole didn't know, what no one ever told him, was that June had stopped calling, not because she gave up, but because she ran out of time.
June Merritt waited. She waited through October, through November, through Christmas, which she made as normal as she could for Ellie. Lights on the porch, cookies baked from scratch, her voice steady even when everything inside her wasn't. She filed a missing persons report in December. The officer told her, gently, that adult men who left on their own were hard to find. She hired a private investigator in February. He found nothing. She told Ellie that Daddy was working far away, that he loved her, that he was coming back. She told herself that too. What she never told anyone, not her mother, not her friends, not the social worker who called twice, was why Wade had been at the house that night. She kept that to herself. Because some things feel too enormous to say out loud. Some things, if you name them, become real in a way you're not prepared to survive. And so she just kept going, the way women like June always do, with her hands steady and her face forward and something enormous crumbling quietly behind her. By the time Cole finally came home, there was no one left to forgive him, and no way to undo what his silence had cost. It was a Tuesday in March when Cole got the letter. He hadn't gotten mail in years, nothing personal anyway, just the occasional utility notice forwarded through the mill's office. This envelope was handwritten, his name in careful, deliberate letters. The return address, Glenn Tatum, his old neighbor on Carmichael Street, a man he hadn't spoken to since the night he left. He read it standing in the parking lot. He read it twice, and then he sat down on the hood of his truck, right there in the gravel, in the cold, and he didn't move for a long time. The letter said 3 things. The first thing, Wade was dead, heart attack, 3 weeks ago. The second thing, Ellie was living with June's sister now, doing okay, finishing high school. And the third thing, the thing Glenn had waited 7 years to say. The thing Wade had begged him to say on his deathbed when it was already too late for any of it to matter. Glenn wrote, "Cole, the night you left, June wasn't with Wade the way you thought. She went to him because she didn't know how to tell you herself. She'd just gotten the diagnosis that afternoon, stage 3. She'd known for 2 weeks and hadn't said a word because you'd just been laid off, and she was trying to protect you. She was crying in his arms because she was terrified, not of dying, of how to tell you. Wade begged her to call you after you left. She tried. You never answered. She passed 14 months after you disappeared. The last thing she said to Wade was, 'Tell him it wasn't what he thought.'"
Cole drove back to North Carolina the next morning. He didn't have a plan. He just drove. He stood at June's grave for a long time. He thought about all the nights he had sat in that room in Reedsville, convincing himself he was punishing her, when all along she had been dying. She had been dying and looking for him and running out of time, and he had been 2 states away, throwing his phone into a soybean field because he couldn't bear to hear her voice. He visited Ellie. She was 17 now. She had June's eyes. She stood in her aunt's doorway and looked at him for a long time without speaking. She didn't slam the door. She didn't scream. She just said, "She waited for you." And then she closed the door, quietly, the way people do when they've already finished grieving something. Cole Merritt had spent 7 years believing he was the one who had been betrayed. 7 years carrying the image of a woman in his brother's arms like it was an open wound. 7 years so convinced he was right that he never once considered he might be wrong. He had walked out on a woman who was terrified and sick and reaching for the nearest hand she could find. He had abandoned his daughter for a story he had written entirely in his own head. And by the time the truth finally found him in a handwritten letter from an old neighbor on a Tuesday in March, June had been in the ground for 6 years. Wade was gone. Ellie had grown up learning how to love people who leave. And Cole drove north through the night, the letter folded in his breast pocket, pressed against a heart that had made the most catastrophic decision of his life in 5 seconds of silence, and had spent every day since then certain it was the right one. If this story hit you differently, you know why. We tell ourselves stories to survive. The dangerous part is when we stop questioning them. If you're new here, subscribe. We drop stories like this every week. Share this one with someone who needs to slow down and look again. And drop a comment. Have you ever walked away from something you didn't fully understand? I read every one. I'll see you in the next story.